Now available on Tata Sky channel number 526.
Hello and welcome to Magicbricks Now. You're watching the Urban Debate. I'm Kavita Krishnan. We have a very special show lined up for you tonight. But let me tell you this, it's a big day for real estate today. It's a big day for home buyers today. And on Magicbricks Now, we are not tiring of saying this. Today is the day the regulator has finally become real. The law has been passed. But first, let's have a look at the top headlines of the day. Like I said, big day for home buyers, bigger day for the real estate sector. After years of going back and forth, the Parliament finally passes the Real Estate Regulatory Authority. The sector finally gets its regulator. A triumphant Urban Development Minister Venkaiah Naidu says that the regulator will help realize the housing for all dream. It will also help attract investments to a fund-starved sector. That's an exclusive. Industry also hails the regulator, says it will bring in transparency and efficiency. But sales could suffer initially as buyers and builders get used to the regulator. Right, so those were the top headlines of the evening. Let me also get in Faye D'Souza. Faye, as you know, is the editor of Magicbricks Now. She's been in Delhi all through the day, tracking the real estate regulatory bill, tracking the passage of this very crucial bill. She's joining in from our Delhi studio. Faye, welcome to the show.
Well, Kavita, what an awesome day it is for home buyers across the country. And, you know, from early morning today in Delhi, we've been tracking this entire process. And it was a really heartening discussion that took place in the Rajya Sabha. We saw all parties come together, put aside their differences, put the customer, the home buyer, the citizen first, put the needs of the home buyer first. There was a lot of healthy conversation that happened in the Rajya Sabha about this bill. A fair amount of thought had gone into it. And, after a long wait, the conversation, the debate actually started about 2 o'clock in the afternoon when the bill was tabled. But close to about 5:30 in the evening, we saw it being passed, and to great cheer. We were all very excited. And of course, this changes everything. This is a new phase. We enter a new phase in our industry right now. The real estate sector enters a new phase. As home buyers, we enter a completely new phase as well. And to help us sort of break down the version of the bill that got passed and what it means for you and me, Sanjay Dutt, he's the Managing Director at Cushman Wakefield, joins us right now, as does Gulam Zia, Executive Director, Knight Frank India. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining in. Gulam, of course, a couple of things changed. There was some grey area about what we were going to expect. But we saw some changes. For example, the escrow account. We didn't know whether it was going to be 50% to 70%. Both of those levels had been deliberated. It's now at 70%. Infrastructure status, for example, for the sector for affordable housing. After this bill has been passed, consumer courts are going to be let in. 60 days for complaints to be redressed. This is a massive move, especially for buyers who've been waiting 4-5 years in consumer court. 60 days seems like a dream. When you look at the bill right now, what according to you is the most significant thing in that bill?
Well, as you rightly mentioned, Faye, the most heartening part of it was a very healthy debate in Rajya Sabha. And for most of us, the citizens of the country, when we're watching with horror for last so many days, there's nothing, no dialogue, nothing happening. I was so amazed that for my sector, for real estate, there has been such a huge healthy debate for 3 hours and more. And that was something to me was a great actually highlight of the day. And so many of these opposition members actually came up with lots of constructive ideas, as we have seen, and that's something once again to me is a great thing. Of course, that's only for today. The jubilation is out of that. But then the moment, the golden moment is at last, the bill is passed. And you're talking about so many of these things as you have enlisted. So many of these things are really the positives for the home buyers. A home buyer who was historically neglected, who was historically exploited for they had no choice. Either it was their way or highway. And that's something which was actually forcing them to remain with whatever options were offered to them. So a lot of these things, and over and above what you spoke about, well, let's not forget about the defect liability period, which was actually actually jacked up from 2 years to 5 years. So a lot of these things which have come in, and a lot of suggestions have also come about. I'm sure, of course, there's a debate about retrospective or prospective kind of a thing. A lot of these things, but currently as it stands, retrospective effect is something which many of hundreds of those buyers who are out there suffering can actually look up to for a quick redressal of those issues that they're facing.
Here's the interesting thing, and this was the first thing that the Urban Development Minister brought up. The fact that up until now, we were looking at a possibility of any project over 1,000 square meters and 12 apartment units being brought under this regulator. Then we found out that we're talking about 500 square meters and anything above 8 units will be brought under the regulator. One of the members of the opposition actually suggested have no limit at all. Why aren't you regulating everything? But, bringing in, construction of this size, 8 units, is that going to slow things down, you think?
I don't think there's going to be a slowdown in the construction, but implementation of the act on the projects which are currently ongoing, where construction is ongoing, would definitely bring in a certain amount of confusion in them, wherein the developers would have to restructure their banking requirements. They would have to restructure their agreements, work out clear modalities that whether the sold stock and the collection received from that, whether that comes under the compliance of the act or it doesn't come under the compliance of the act, so on and so forth. So we'll have to wait and see how the rules frame out, and then only we can comment on this with any kind of judiciousness.
Well, Rohit Rajmodi, I want to ask you this. When we spoke with Niranjan Hirandani earlier today about the impact on his projects, and he said the same two things. He said the fact that escrow will now go up to 70%, including the cost of land, and the fact that a lot of things are going to have to be restructured. He foresaw an immediate 50 rupees per square foot increase in his prices right away. And he said, yes, of course, when clearances come down, when single window clearance becomes a reality, obviously that will offset against the benefit there. But right now, he said, I foresee prices going up. Do you see that as well?
Yeah, because if 70% of the total receivables are locked in an escrow, that leads to underutilization or suboptimal use of the capital. Once that happens, there would be the financial cost of executing the project, which will impact the prices of the project in an adverse manner from a buyer's perspective. I do agree that once the single window happens and all those governance issues kick in, we may see this the time benefit kicking in favor of the developer. But as you and I both understand, single window is a easier said than done mechanism. It will take some time because there are plethora of agencies, some at state and a few at center, which are required to provide approval for any real estate project in the country.
Rohit, I want to give you some good news, which is that I had a conversation this morning in New Delhi with the Housing Secretary, Dr. Nandita Chatterjee. That's an interview we're going to be playing out a little later in the show today. And she shared with us that the Housing Ministry has been sitting down with all of the other ministries, whether it's the Aviation, the Environment Ministry, the Heritage, all of them have been sitting down and coming up with model guidelines that they will share with every city, hoping to bring down, and I know this is going to make you smile, Rohit, hoping to bring down the time it takes for all clearances to 26 days. Now, in her opinion, and I brought up the fact that, you're regulating the industry but not the people who hand out permission. She said if this plays out and we can hand out permissions in 26 days, then there's no need then to regulate people at local authority. Would you agree?
That would be a dream come true, but land being a state subject, it's the PWDs and the municipal corporation and the local pollution control board, local PWD, and all those are the agencies which grant the permission. So I would hope and pray for the day when we can get it in 26 days time. I think that benefit would be immense, and at the end of the day the consumer would benefit with a smooth mechanism like that as and when it happens.
I just want to take a moment here to explain to our viewers what was decided in this bill. Now, The major problem that the government was trying to solve is the problem of delays. And according to the government, there are two main reasons why delays happen. One, of course, is bad fiscal management on part of the developer, which they're hoping to solve through what is being called an escrow account. So 70% of everything a builder raises through sales for a particular building will have to be put in a separate bank account and used for construction of that building. It cannot be diverted to anything else. That's one point. The second point, of course, is delays in permissions that's been causing complete havoc in the industry. Sometimes permissions take upwards of 3 years, sometimes 5 years. So the government is also, according to the conversation we had this morning, working very hard on being able to crunch down that time as well in order to make that process also efficient, thereby bringing down the time it takes to get clearances. Gulam, the other very interesting thing we heard, and I want Rohit's view on this as well, the industry was a little worried about the inclusion of a possible jail term for violation of what the appellate tribunal decided. Now, the minister very clearly said that the jail term will be used as an absolute last resort. There will be warnings issued first, then there'll be fines, and then only when there is no other choice will the jail term be exercised. It's largely more as a deterrent. Do you think that's, that's sort of a bit of a relief for the industry?
Well, even brokers are facing jail term. If you have seen through this, 3 years for a builder and 1 year for a broker is what it talks about. So, it's actually something which will only bring in some discipline in this industry, which desperately needs for the systems and processes to fall in place. So, I don't really see much of an issue in that because, of course, we're talking about repeat offenses. And getting into repeat offenses is something which obviously calls for such kind of a tough action. And as if you recall in the debate, it was also highlighted, one of the members did talk about it, that there are other regulators and other businesses where the jail term actually goes up to as much as 10 years. So it was completely to explain that this is not such a draconian act as it is made out to be. So if you are in line, if you're actually doing your business properly, one mistake, perhaps a warning, second mistake, a fine, and then of course it comes to, or talks about the jail term. So there's nothing to unduly get worried about these things.
Rohit, does the fact that the jail term only become a last resort and a deterrent more than actually something that the courts will resort to, does that give you a bit of some relief there? Because I know that was something the industry was concerned about.
Look, I think the way they have positioned it, it is fair enough because it's a deterrent. And I agree with what Gulam just said, that this also kicks in if there is a violation of the appellate tribunal's judgment or decision. We have to wait and see how the rules get fanned out in this. Once we have the rules, if there's a clarity of the rules that what kind of show cause or the chances would be given. And if for a repeat offender, I don't think there's any issue because rightly said that, the financial crimes also have punishments which lead to anything between 3 to 10 years of jail term. As long as those rules are well laid out and it is not used as a tool of extortion or coercion by competent authority on the developers. Because as we all understand, there are already too many watchdogs on real estate sector, whether one may agree with that or not. And we don't need another spot of coercion. We require a regulator who helps to build an enabling environment for the sector and industry and not becomes a stumbling block in itself.
The Urban Development Minister, Venkaiah Naidu, has a very interesting sense of humor. And a couple of times in his address today, he said that he wants regulation and not strangulation of the industry. And then he went on to say that while the customer is king, he believes the real estate industry is queen, and in order for them to live happily ever after, this is the bill that's going to make it all possible. I want to bring in Sanjay Dutt. I'm told he joins us on the show right now. Sanjay, when I look at this bill and in the conversations that I have with buyers on a daily basis on this channel, I think the big kicker here will be all of the information that will be available online to any buyer before they buy something. So actually separating good developers from fly-by-night builders, allowing us all of the information, all authenticized, verified information that we need as buyers to make good choices. I think that's the most important thing that this bill is going to bring out.
It is true, Faye, because eventually the buyers need to make an informed decision. and you cannot make informed decision based on the basis of some data collected by some agency which cannot put credibility to the whole data that they gather. And there has been a big disconnect between developers and various research agencies in the past. And therefore, when you put together data which is backed by government and it's online, it's effective, will enable buyers to do that. And I think all the stakeholders will be conscious about it, and therefore they will make sure that they keep their track record in good condition.
Sanjay, the other thing that that Venkaiah Naidu did say was also that this is something that will help the government realize the housing for all dream. Now we've seen what has happened when other sectors got their regulators. We've seen the most famous example, of course, is that of the telecom sector. After TRAI came in, call rates have gone from a high of 14 rupees per call per minute to something like 50 paise per minute. So we're talking of that kind of price differential. Will this eventually lead to a day where because of competition, because of transparency, homes will probably become affordable?
I would consider that a long-term goal and possibility. I think in the short term, you may actually see a reverse impact, because more and more developers will become more conscious of making sure that they actually roll out the plans when they're fully deliberated, they've thought through, and they've taken a call, and they have understood the regulations that the government has specified for various micro markets across the country. And we're talking about state governments here. Some state governments may be able to provide that information for developer to be able to roll out such plans. And in many states, it may not be the case. So I believe in the short term, there could be a price escalation. Number of launches may actually come down. But eventually, when the whole ecosystem of the real estate becomes very well integrated, and there is ease of doing business, there is access to land, there is access to approval, everything is online, municipal corporations are aligned, and you see more land getting unlocked and more development potential getting unlocked, that would be the day when you will see supply matching demand, and therefore prices coming down. And I think that would be the goal, and that would be the long-term impact, but in the short term, it may be very different.
Right. So Sanjay, how long is that long term? How long will people have to actually wait to see homes getting more affordable?
I think you will see some states taking a lead here and setting an example for other states to follow. And I think there is a political will in many states where you will see this, if not exactly falling in place precisely, but surprising developers that this can actually be achieved. The moment that happens, I think you will see a kind of a wave, because they will become role models, and there'll be a pressure on other state governments actually to perform. But be mentally prepared to see this happen over the next 5 years, because this is not going to happen in next 6 months or 12 months.
So next 5 years, Faye?
Well, Kavita, I want to understand from Gulam this very, very clear thing. Obviously, now we have another step, and with the Home Buyers Association, we had this conversation today saying today is the end of one very long battle for the regulator. Tomorrow will be the first day for a new battle, which is to get every state to implement its regulator, to set in an entire system, to bring in an appellate tribunal. So we're going to have to push each state to to be ready and to actually do this as soon as possible, because at the end of the day, it will depend on how each state takes it. Now, we know Maharashtra is possibly closest to implementing their regulator. Gulam, I want to understand from you, the Maharashtra Housing Act that it's currently in force, will it be replaced by this one completely? Will MOFA be replaced by this one completely? How would this work going forward?
Look, as far as I recall, very distinctly, the Honorable Minister did mention that your local acts, whether it is MOFA or the likes of it, will not be completely repealed. It will actually something will be running parallelly to the RERA. That's point number one. Point number two is the Maharashtra Act that we are talking about was aligned to the RERA in its earlier avatars. What we see today is the more refined and the final version, which has come in as an act. and by the time it becomes law, the differential is not going to be too much for Maharashtra state to catch up with. So the way I look at it, Maharashtra is perhaps in the most advanced stage of rolling the whole regulator out. But one point I would want to highlight over here, that this is not the option or choice with the state governments to go for RERA or not. Be very clear on this, that this, once it becomes law, once the Lok Sabha also clears it, every state will have to implement it. So all those 644 regulators in every district that we're talking about will be a reality in a time-bound manner. This act is asking you to get your regulator in 3 months and put up the infrastructure in 6 months, get the regulator up and running in a year. So it's a very time-bound action that is taken up under this law. And once it becomes a law, there is no escape. It's not that some state will actually do it. They may actually do a half-hearted or haphazard kind of approach to implement this, but then there is no escape from this.
Faye, I have something to say.
Of course. Yes, go ahead.
I believe the judicial system will make references to the conditions of the act, and going forward, whether it's implemented by the state or not, I think this impact will be felt across, because that's very obvious wherever the pending litigations are there, ongoing discussion are there, and there is a lack of resolvement on the issues pertaining to penalties and interests of the consumer. This actually will set things right, and therefore, even though states may not have implemented it, but the judicial system will actually take action on the basis of the guidelines.
You know, Sanjay, the other big thing that came out of this bill for all home buyers watching right now, especially those people who are worried that you'll wind up, going to consumer court for the next 5 years if you wind up in trouble. Here's the thing. You have an appellate tribunal right now within the real estate regulator in every state. Plus, you can also approach consumer courts. And, Sanjay, the promise of redressal and closure in less than 60 days. Now, there are two advantages here. A customer who's already distressed doesn't have to wait for 5 years for a ruling, which is normally what happens in consumer court. Secondly, from an industry point of view, we know a lot of times stop work orders come from courts as soon as someone files some sort of PIL. Now, if you're looking at a 60-day window in which all problems have to be addressed and solved, then can we also hope that over a period of time, that sort of stop work orders and bringing construction to a grinding halt through the legal system will also sort of come down? Construction will happen faster?
I have mixed reaction to this. I hope it does, but the reality is that there would be enough incidents where the developer community will actually bring forward various situations where the state government or the municipal corporations or various bodies, they themselves would be party to the delay. And I think that is what is going to make the whole subject very complicated. Because at the end of the day, the developer can only do certain things to ensure that the larger interest of the consumer is protected, and they will take abundant precaution going forward. But the fact that there is no inclusion of the government and there are certain situations linked to it, the developer may actually bring out certain aspect and may therefore delay such decisions. So I hope it comes down. I hope the 60-day stays and therefore there is no disruption in building this country, which obviously will be detrimental to the interests of the nation.
I want to bring in Rohit here. Rohit, as a developer yourself, what's your reaction to this 60-day promise? I mean, there's one thing to worry about. Obviously, when these appellate tribunals are set up, will they have the infrastructure? Will there be enough judges on the bench? Which we saw was a problem with consumer court this entire time, which is why it takes so long to work through consumer court. Now, let's assume all of those do come in and they do manage to put in the infrastructure. 60 days to resolve a dispute, does that sound promising?
Very promising, and personally I think that would be fantastic for all the stakeholders involved in the industry, be it the consumer or the developer or any other such stakeholder. But I must highlight over here the aspect that non-inclusion of the urban local bodies or the development authority or the municipal corporation which provides the approvals and the completion. The question is on the completion of the occupation certificate, because the Act addresses the first part of things, that you would launch the project after you get certain amount of approvals and etc. But we cannot hand over the apartments till the completion certificate is not granted or the occupation certificate is not granted. And the fact of the matter is that most of the development authorities or ULBs have had a very, very poor track record in providing the completion certificate. There are projects which are over for more than 5-7 years but still not got the completion certificates, and that part does not get covered in the Act. I hope that going forward the ministry brings out certain amendments and includes the ULBs also as part of this. Having said that, I think the Ministry of
Rohit,
Urban Development and our parliamentarians have done a phenomenal job in having a very balanced Act.
Right, a balanced Act over there. Faye, we have the Kerala real estate regulator who's joining us. We have the chairman of RERA, as it's called, Ajay Kumar. Ajay Kumar, welcome to the Urban Debate. You were essentially the first regulator to, to be up and running in a sense. Now that the bill has become an act, I understand that you all are not yet fully functional. You all are going to be functional by the 1st of April. Does this give you a better sense of a roadmap?
Yeah, we are planning to start by April 1st onwards. And the rules are getting ready in our law department. And within 2 weeks, it will be ready. So by April 1st onwards, we will be starting. Actually, this is a good piece of legislation. We have modeled it on the Central Act. Almost all the sections are similar to the Central Act. And as a regulatory thing, this is good. And as they ask, but on the development side, a little more things have to be done, I think.
Okay, little more has to be done, but the Kerala regulator, at least first of the block there, even before the National Real Estate Regulatory Authority bill was passed, that Kerala regulator will be up and running by the 1st of April, and we are hoping that the other states will follow suit soon. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the entire panel over here. Gulam Zia, Sanjay Dutt, Rohit Raj Modi, thank you very much for joining us. Faye, great having you. Great that you could join us finally on the show from Delhi. I know how difficult it was to get you onto this show tonight. You've been there throughout the day. I'm sure it was a wonderful day. You've been covering the action from the ground.
It actually was a very exciting day from this morning when we started our conversation with the Housing Secretary, and she shared with us completely exclusive details of what the government is planning in terms of PPPs on affordable housing, how they plan to involve the private sector, how they plan to use FAR and FSI to encourage more homes to be built, and of course finally what the plans are for RERA going forward. So it was a very exciting day, and of course as we wrap up the day on Magicbricks Now, a completely new universe spreads out in front of us as home buyers starting tomorrow when we have a regulator. And on this channel, along with all of the stakeholders who are part of this industry, our aim will continue to help you understand the new world of Indian real estate and what your rights are as a home buyer and how you can make use of those rights to make brighter, smarter, more educated decisions. Kavita?
Well, there for real estate, for Indian real estate. Stay with us. We are winding up Urban Debate over here, but coming up now is a very special concrete dialogue for you. We will get you that conversation that Faye D'Souza had earlier today with the Housing Secretary Nandita Chatterjee. Stay with us.
You can watch live TV on our website mpnow.in. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Magicbricks Now. And don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at Magicbricks Now. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/Magicbricks Now.